The FBI informant in the Uranium One probe revealed today, his name is William Campbell. He worked as a lobbyist for a Russian firm, confirmed to Reuters that he will testify before Congress about Hillary Clinton's role in the 2010 deal, which relinquished 20% of U.S. uranium reserves to Russia. Campbell's attorney has said there's on-the-record quid pro quo surrounding the deal. Joining me now for more, Fox News national security strategist and contributor, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. So, Doctor, we have a name, we have a witness. He claims to have some kind of proof. How solid is that proof going to have to be to get something on Hillary Clinton?
You've just asked the $64,000 question. We are facing... We have a president who's faced down the international threats. We've crushed ISIS in Mosul, in Raqqa. We're dealing with North Korea every day. But we have an internal threat, and it's a very simple one. It's one of moral fortitude and substance. Are we a nation of laws? And is there anybody who is above the law? Is Hillary Clinton and really her criminal cartel of decades above the law or not? The idea that we had James Comey cook the books before the investigation was finished on Servergate, the idea we now know from within the FBI that her case was given special treatment, sealed off from other FBI agents at the highest level. Uranium One has the potential to be the largest national security scandal since the end of World War II. 20% of our uranium sold to Russia. Are they above the law? We will now find out, David.
And selling real estate, selling United States real estate, particularly involving uranium, to another country. Now, we should mention that a lot of the people involved in Rosatom, the Russian agency that was responsible for getting that 20% of uranium, there were all of these, I think there was a total of 9 of the board members gave contributions to the Clinton Foundation at around the same time that all this was being discussed. To which I would say, I know a little bit about Russia. I covered it back in the days when they were transforming from the Soviet Union into Russia. There were no philanthropists there in my days. They don't give money to beggars on the street, let alone to U.S. foundations. There must have been some quid pro quo, no?
Fabulous observation. Your work with the Wall Street Journal, you know that in Central and Eastern Europe there was no indigenous philanthropy. The philanthropy that was there came from the outside, from us, from the West, from Western European nations. But then suddenly the Clintons get $140 million from Russia into their account. Yeah, that didn't happen out of the goodness of some rich Russian magnate's heart. That's not how it works out there. It is pay for play. Hillary was the chairman of the CFIUS committee that had to approve that sale. We have legislation on the books, David, that requires that America is not dependent on anybody else for our uranium. By law, we must be independent. She said, no need, let's sell 20% of it to Vladimir, my buddy.
Well, even, by the way, if you were to accept the deal as an honest deal, which a lot of people doubt, it was the uranium was not supposed to leave the U.S., although apparently some did. Some was sent up to Canada, from which it was then sent over to Europe.
Not only that, yes, we now know that we were lied to, the American people were lied to, that it wouldn't be sold to foreign powers, which it was. More importantly, when the decision was taken by Hillary and other members of the Obama administration to sell this uranium, that deal was under investigation by the FBI because of the corruption occurring inside America, the people being paid off, that trucking company. This was a federal investigation that shouldn't even have got to that decision-making body as it was being investigated, but it did, and it was approved thanks to Hillary.
Now, some people say that the particular FBI investigation didn't necessarily have to do with the Uranium One deal. However, it showed this climate of corruption that surrounds an institution. The guy who was finally sent to jail was in charge of the U.S. operations of uranium deals with Russia. That was his purview. That was what he was in charge of. And for him to be sent to jail for bribery, kickbacks, et cetera, you name it, shows that there was a climate of corruption surrounding a company that we sold 20% of our uranium to.
That argument that these things are disconnected simply does not hold water. How do we know that? We have now this email, thanks, I believe, to Judicial Watch, from Loretta Lynch, threatening Mr. Campbell, threatening this informant, saying, if you don't keep to your non-disclosure agreement, I will get you imprisoned. We have an acting AG threatening an American citizen to keep your mouth shut about what you know about the uranium deal. So that is that's pretty damning evidence.
More reaction to my opening monologue. Former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DeGeneva, and the person that the press said would never be back on my show, the author of Trumped Up, Harvard Law School professor, Professor Alan Dershowitz is with us. Let me ask both of you the same question. I'll start with you, Joe. This is from the Comey memo. If there was some satellite, meaning he said I took this to mean associate of his campaign, if they did something, this is Trump to Comey, it would be good to find that out, but that he himself hadn't done anything. That sounds to me like he is encouraging the FBI director to look into all of this, and even if it's somebody close to him, to find out the truth. So A, he's not obstructing justice, and B, he's encouraging the investigation to go forward.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that these 15 pages of James Comey's notes constitute a suicide note, a lengthy suicide note. It shows clearly that
you do have a way with words, you know that.
He has deceived, well, I mean, this stuff is pretty obvious. He has deceived Congress as a result of the substance in these memoranda. He has deceived the American people. And I must say, he has deluded himself. It is quite obvious that the president is an innocent man and that the collusion theory has been ridiculous from the beginning.
And obstruction.
Yes, but these memorandums show conclusively that James Comey knew that from the very beginning. He hid it from the American people. He hid it from Congress. And I must say that as he goes on this ridiculous tour, he is destroying the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I can tell you, Sean, from conversations with people inside that building at headquarters, they are very, very disappointed and very angry.
Well, I want to say something about this.
Who believes that he is destroying a great institution.
I want to remind people that I don't ever want to sweep with a broad brush here. There are men and women that risk their lives in that organization, in our CIA, in our intelligence community, that put their lives on the line. We cannot judge them by the conduct of a couple of people here.
Absolutely correct.
I agree completely. You know,
and none of us has, by the way.
Yeah.
None of us has. We've all said it's the hierarchy, it's the McCabe's, it's the Comeys. It's got nothing to do with the rank and file. They are angry at what Comey is doing to their great institution.
Look, several years ago, my life was threatened by an inmate in a federal prison, a neo-Nazi, and the FBI assigned 2 agents to me full-time. They came to my class. They came with me to Boston Celtics basketball games. And I really got to just love these 2 guys. They gave me their home numbers no matter what, 24/7 I could call them. And they protected me. They protected my family. You know, I was brought up to love law enforcement. I was a member of the Police Athletic League as a kid. I represent policemen, any law enforcement people, free of charge because we owe them so much. But I have to agree with you, and it started in Boston a long, long time ago when the Whitey Bulger matter came up, and we saw how people at every level covered for him and allowed innocent people to remain in prison. So it's so important to ferret out the bad guys. One of them's now in prison, John Connolly. I have to tell you, I helped put him in prison. I consulted pro bono with the prosecutors to help keep that guy in prison because he was such a bad egg. He was telling Whitey Bulger who to kill. He was telling Whitey Bulger to escape, and he managed to escape for 16 years. And for 16 years, the FBI couldn't find Whitey Bulger. He was in plain view in Santa Monica, California, reportedly going to a Red Sox bar to watch baseball games, and the FBI couldn't find him. Finally, a person from the Federal Marshal Program found him. So, look, I think we have to commend FBI agents, CIA agents, and focus on the problems and where they occur.
Let me ask this then.
Yeah.
And I maybe you agree or disagree here, but look at the criminal referrals that have come down this week. You know, the congressional criminal referrals they are citing specific laws that they believe were violated. Then Andrew McCabe and the IG criminal referral. Now we have an investigation. James Comey. I said this before he went on his book tour, Joe DeGeneva. This is a bad idea. I don't think any competent lawyer would have advised him writing that book and doing this tour in any way. But now he is under an Inspector General investigation here about releasing classified materials. 18 USC 793. Both of you are very familiar with it.
Yes. Well, Sean, here's what's going to happen. This is now, it's all afoot, and it can't be stopped. There's going to be a series of federal grand juries investigating these things, the leaking of the memos to the New York Times, the unmasking of individuals, which was illegal, the leaking of the unmasked information to newspapers, which were felonies, and the other things that involve the misuse of the intelligence and FISA warrants. There is going to be a series of grand juries, and there are going to be charges. I don't know who's going to be charged, but it's very important that this be done the right way, and that can only be done with federal grand juries, and that's the way the Hillary Clinton case should have been handled, but it wasn't. Well, so now we're going to see it done right.
Well, you know, it's so interesting because, of course, this is what I predicted from the very beginning in my book, Trumped Up. Once you unleash this business of trying to lock him up, it's going to come back and bite you in the rear end. Yep. That today you go after Trump, tomorrow they're going to go after Democrats. You cannot unleash this weapon of expanding the criminal law and targeting people without it coming back. You know, there's that great line from A Man for All Seasons about one of the greatest lawyers in history, Thomas More, when they say, would you give the devil the benefit of the law? And the answer is yes, because if you don't give the devil the benefit of the law, when the law comes for you, you will not have it. Of course, the German philosopher said the same thing when they came for the Jews. I didn't do anything because when they came for me, there was no one left to talk. So when you defend the civil liberties of Donald Trump, you're defending the civil liberties of all Americans, and people have to come to understand that.
I think that's extraordinarily well said. Joe, earlier this week on this program, you said there is no doubt now that there was a grand conspiracy among, again, not rank and file. It's so important to make that distinction, but among people in the highest levels of power with the most powerful tools of intelligence, which they need in a very evil and dangerous world to protect all of us, and that they have abused those weapons for warrants and unmasking. Look at the 350% increase in unmasking. Samantha Power, a UN official, unmasking of an American a day. I mean, is this the biggest conspiracy? You believe a conspiracy?
Well, here's the way I describe it, Sean. It was a brazen plot, which was carried out with this purpose in mind by the Obama administration's senior Justice Department officials and senior FBI officials, which was to illegally exonerate Hillary Clinton in order to help her get elected. And if she lost, then the plan was to frame Donald Trump with crimes. And every single thing that we have seen over the last few months certifies through fact and reasonable inferences from facts that that is exactly what occurred. And if I were James Clapper and John Brennan and Samantha Power and a bunch of people who wanted to unleash the criminal law process on Donald Trump and his family, they are going to find out the hard way that they are now ensnared in the most significant political scandal in the history of this country, where one administration leaving office used the intelligence community to spy on the presidential candidate of the other party. And it's going to come home
let's
to
get a
roost.
response.
I think you're attributing much too much rationality and coherence and planning to what was probably a series of independent events which, in retrospect, look like they could be coordinated. You know, as the philosopher said, we live life forward without knowing what's going to happen, but then we look at life backward. So I'm not going to buy into your conspiracy theory, but I do think that we need to have equal application.
You do agree there's been abuse, though?
I think
there has been abuse of power.
I have no question there's been abuse on both sides. That's why I called for an independent bipartisan commission right in the beginning to look at this whole mess, the whole election, the whole influence, the attempt to influence by Russia the election, without pointing fingers, without criminal liability, so we can prevent it in the future. I still think it's not too late for that.
We're going to have a lot of grand juries. I think that ship has sailed, is my humble opinion. But and joining us now on these latest developments, he is the host of CRTV's Levin TV, the host of the hit show Sunday nights, 10 Eastern, right here on Fox. Life, Liberty, and Levin. I call him the great one, Mark Levin. Let me pick up right where we just left off there. The President of the United States, in James Comey's own words in the memo, is saying, do not shut down the investigation. If there are associates or satellites or people that are around me that did something inappropriate, I want you to get to the bottom of it. I don't think it gets any more exculpatory than that, Mark.
These memos actually help the president. There is nothing incriminating in them. I took 25 minutes to read as best I could. I went through them. See these redacted areas? They incriminate Comey because he said he didn't release classified information. At the bottom of a number of these pages, it says classified. Comey said he didn't classify information, so he's got some splaining to do. But I've gone through this. The president is furious about these allegations about prostitutes and, and so forth, and he continually denies it. That didn't happen, and so forth and so on. These are Comey's notes. And Ed Henry made the other points. But I want to point out something, too, Sean, which is this. So today, as you reported, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Rosenstein, told the president last week that he's not a target in the Michael Cohen case or the Russian case or both cases. Let's get something straight. I was on your program back in July last year. I've got two memoranda. One under the Nixon administration, one under the Clinton administration. The Clinton administration memorandum is 39 pages long with a zillion footnotes. And here's what it says, America, and this is what you need to know that's been going on to your country. The memo is addressed to the Attorney General of the United States from the Office of Legal Counsel, which handles constitutional issues. A sitting president's amenability to indictment and criminal prosecution. The indictment or criminal prosecution of a sitting president would unconstitutionally undermine the capacity of the executive branch to perform its constitutionally assigned functions. Page after page after page saying a sitting United States president cannot be indicted. Now, my question is this. Did they issue another memo over there at the Justice Department reversing these two memos during the Nixon administration and the Clinton administration? No. No. Mr. Rosenstein, you're the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. You've been overseeing Robert Mueller. You tell the President of the United States last week that he's not a criminal target. Damn it, he can't be a criminal target under the memoranda that have been written by the Justice Department. Moreover, Justice Department regulations require the special counsel of the United States to follow the rules, regulations, and, quote, policies of the Department of Justice. Mr. President, don't sit down with this special counsel. This special counsel doesn't have the power to indict you, and for good reason. Let me read this one paragraph. This is from the Clinton administration Justice Department. In 1973, the department concluded that the indictment or criminal prosecution of a sitting president would impermissibly undermine the capacity of the executive branch to perform its constitutionally assigned functions. I'm hoping Professor Dershowitz is listening. We've been asked to summarize and review the analysis provided in support of that conclusion and to consider whether any subsequent developments in law lead us today to reconsider, modify, or disavow that determination. Please, one more sentence. We believe that the conclusion reached by the department in 1972 still represents the best interpretation of the Constitution. They are saying Mr. Mueller's boss, Mr. Rosenstein's boss, unless Attorney General Sessions has rejected the Department of Justice's position that a sitting president cannot be indicted. So what are we doing?
Well, you know what they're doing. What they're doing is that they want to set up a impeachment possibility.
Exactly.
Depending on, well, and that's why this whole, listen, it's anybody's, talk about monopoly or any type of board. How do you go from, Pasco all the way to Boardwalk and Park Place if, in fact, now we're at Stormy Daniels? But I have a more important question. Last night,
sir.
Congressman Ron DeSantis and 10 other congressmen sent criminal referrals for Strzok and for Page and McCabe and Comey and Hillary Clinton and these other people involved in this dossier. Then we have the criminal referral today for Andrew McCabe from the Inspector General. Walk us through the legal aspects of this, where this heads next, and what. I know you have called for the firing of the Attorney General, and he's a friend of yours over these years.
No, I did not call for the firing. I said he should step down.
Okay,
and he is
I
a friend of
apologize.
mine, and I don't really enjoy it. I've known him for 30 years. And here's the problem. The Deputy Attorney General is out of control. The President of the United States has his shoulders pinned to the wall. It's the job of the Attorney General to control the Deputy Attorney General. The Deputy Attorney General of the United States is usurping the powers of the Attorney General. The Attorney General was confirmed by the Senate. He is a presidential appointee. This is what our Constitution requires. An inferior officer cannot usurp the power of the Attorney General, as Mr. Rosenstein has done. I'm going to tell you something. There's a case that's been taking place in the Manafort case. They went into federal district court and they said, Mueller is exercising authority he doesn't have. This took place today with all the rest of this stuff going on. I don't know what this federal district judge is going to do, but you know what she said in open court? They're making a fair point here. Mr. Rosenstein gave this special counsel such remarkably broad powers that it may well be unconstitutional. So let's sum up. The deputy director of the FBI may well be under criminal investigation because he's a serial leaker. The former FBI director may be a witness against his former deputy, and the deputy may be a witness against the former FBI director, who he says is lying. What?
Okay. There's a couple of things, and I want to go back to a question I asked Professor Dershowitz, because this is important. Everything that we now know about Hillary Clinton, and you would be my best lawyer. I'd call you. You're my friend. You're the great one. I call you the great one. But if I deleted 33,000 subpoenaed emails, acid washed the hard drive, beat the crap out of devices, or had someone else do it, that would be obstruction of justice. You know it. I know it. The American people know it. When he wrote Comey and his Trump-hating buddy Strzok the exoneration before the investigation, we know that the fix was in. You don't write that in May and you don't interview her till July, which they did. And then if we have a dossier and you hand that dossier, but foreign national, Russian lies to a FISA court judge and don't say who paid for it and you don't verify it. Mark, you have said this is a post-constitutional America. These instances verify what you wrote in your last book is 100% accurate. These are scary times if you believe in the rule of law, equal application under the law, and the Constitution. Explain.
This is the greatest scandal in modern American history. We have the highest echelons of the FBI and a lot of former FBI officials who are friends of mine, because I worked at the Justice Department, agree, who are corrupt. I don't mean on the take, I mean politically corrupt. And you're seeing that play out now. And the American people are getting a real taste of Mr. Comey, and they don't like him. You're also seeing the criminalization of politics. And we haven't even gotten into what the intelligence side has done. Let's be honest about this. The Democrat Party nominated somebody who was under criminal investigation. Mr. Comey stepped in and protected her. Hillary Clinton is too stupid to understand that he protected her from being indicted, not once, but twice. Can you imagine? We could have had a candidate for federal office indicted. She clearly violated the Espionage Act, not once, but repeatedly. Mr. Comey says you need specific intent in a statute that talks about gross negligence, but we had specific intent. She specifically intended to have a server that was offline, that didn't have the security necessary. She knew she would get classified information, and she knew she would write classified information. Mr. Comey was a special pleader for Hillary Clinton, and this is why the Democrats hated him until the second after Donald Trump fired him, and then they could make their claim about Russian collusion, obstruction of justice, and try to impeach him.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. The great one, you can see him, Life, Liberty, Levin, 10 Eastern, every Sunday night. Congrats on the success of the show, by the way. We love having you here at Fox. All right, we start tonight with President Trump shooting down wild liberal media speculation, as always, that he is going to fire the special counsel Robert Mueller and Rod Rosenstein. During the press conference, this is what the president had to say.
We are hopefully coming to the end. It is a bad thing for our country, very, very bad thing for our country. But there has been no collusion. They won't find any collusion. It doesn't exist. As far as the two gentlemen you told me about, they've been saying, I'm going to get rid of them for the last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and they're still here. So we want to get the investigation over with, done with, put it behind us.
Maybe that'll finally put liberal rumors to rest. Now, also tonight, we have a direct message to all of you in the Destroy Trump media. We know you're watching. While you've been pushing your crackpot conspiracy theories around the clock, 24/7, over a year without any proof, on the show we have been uncovering truth, facts, and actual evidence in what is now the biggest abuse of power scandal in American history. Now, the media has been lying to you and misleading you, the American people, but their time is up. Now, if you remember back in January when I came back from vacation, I said 2018 would be the year of the boomerang and that all of these scandals were going to swing back and blow up right in the Democrats and the media's faces. And that is exactly what is happening because there are stunning new developments just tonight. Congressman Ron DeSantis and 10 other members of Congress, they have sent a criminal referral letter to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, and the U.S. Attorney, John Huber. And these members are now of Congress. They're calling for criminal investigations into the potentially illegal actions of James Comey, of Hillary Clinton, of Loretta Lynch, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and other officials that have ties to the unverified Steele dossier. We've been talking about this. Let's start with James Comey. A quick sidebar before we lay out the case against him. We've been warning the self-serving, holier-than-thou former FBI director that he has the right to remain silent, but Jim Comey just can't seem to keep his mouth shut. And it's been amazing to me that Comey doesn't have an army of lawyers that have been telling him to keep quiet and not release this book because he is now tonight facing serious legal exposure. Here's what we mean. In this brand new letter, these 11 members of Congress, they highlight how Comey spent 14 minutes back on July 5th, 2016, laying out the case for criminal prosecution against Hillary Clinton. But then at the very end, he said basically never mind and didn't recommend the criminal charges. We've talked about equal justice under the law. We can't have a dual justice system. Now, we have since found out that Comey and Strzok and their cohorts, they put the fix in to save Hillary Clinton and her campaign by reaching a decision not to prosecute before interviewing Hillary Clinton and 17 other key witnesses. They were writing that months before they interviewed her. Now, in reaction to this inexcusable absurdity, the letter today writes for this criminal referral. Comey's decision to not seek charges against Clinton's misconduct suggests improper investigative conduct, potentially motivated by a political agenda. And because of that, these 11 congressmen are now referring the following criminal charges to the Department of Justice: 18 U.S.C. 1505, obstruction of proceedings before departments, agencies, and committees, and 18 U.S. Code 1515, definitions for certain provisions, general provision, which appears to be referring to making misleading statements. Then there's the issue of Comey's memos. Now, this letter explains that in order for members of Congress to view them, well, they had to go to a secured facility because 4 of the 7 memos were marked classified and at the secret and confidential levels. Well, we also have the issue of Comey and what he did with those memos. Now, here's what Comey said under oath back in June. Take a look.
I asked, President tweeted on Friday after I got fired that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
Here's the thing. What James Comey just admitted to is leaking classified government information. Laws and crimes that apply. Look at this. 18 U.S.C. 641. Public money, property, or records. This deals with removing those government memos from the FBI. Then there's 18 U.S. Code 793. We've talked about this a lot. Gathering, transmitting, or losing defense information. 18 U.S.C. 1924. An unauthorized removal and retention of classified documents or material. All of this spells massive legal trouble tonight for Jim Comey, but it's just the beginning of Comey's potential criminal misconduct. Now, Comey wrote the Clinton exoneration statement before the investigation. That means before interviewing Hillary and 17 other key witnesses. Well, that's not what Comey testified to under oath. We have the videotape. Take a look.
Director, did you make the decision not to recommend criminal charges relating to classified information before or after Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI on July the 2nd?
After. But if colleagues of ours believe I am lying about when I made this decision, please urge them to contact me privately so we can have a conversation about this. All I can do is tell you again, the decision was made after that because I didn't know what was going to happen in that interview. She maybe lied during the interview in a way we could prove.
Okay, but he wrote the exoneration in May. They interviewed her in July. Now, on top of Comey lying, these members of Congress also point out there appears to be, quote, material inconsistencies between Comey's congressional briefing on the FBI's relationship with dossier author Christopher Steele and DOJ documents that were provided to Congress afterwards. Now, here are the criminal charges that would apply in that case. 18 U.S.C. Code 1621. Perjury, generally. 18 U.S.C. 1001. Now, instead of sitting down with the liberal media, you know, the dream team of liberals, George Stephanopoulos, Steve Colbert, the ladies of The View, and others, Comey probably should be lawyering up. Now, this criminal referral letter today is also recommending criminal charges against Hillary Clinton and an investigation. Now, we know she broke the law by using that unsecure private email server in a mom-and-pop shop bathroom closet, then deleting 33,000 subpoenaed emails, acid washing them, and beating up her devices with a hard drive. These lawmakers today are now demanding an investigation into Clinton for hiding payments to Fusion GPS from the Federal Elections Commission. Now, remember, the Clinton campaign and the DNC that Hillary controlled, they funneled over $12 million through a law firm, Perkins Coie, and then they paid Fusion GPS, which then fired a foreign national. Remember, foreign nationals aren't supposed to influence our election. Well, that's Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele then puts together a dossier full of Russian lies and propaganda that was never verified. Now, third in the congressional criminal referral letter is the former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. She has issues tonight. These members of Congress, they want the Department of Justice now to investigate allegations that Loretta Lynch threatened the Uranium One FBI informant with reprisal. Remember, he was on this show. This is the informant that went undercover 4 years and exposed Putin's money laundering, bribery, kickback, extortion, racketeering scheme that was used to get a foothold in America's uranium market. Now, former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, he's also mentioned in this criminal referral letter. The recent DOJ IG report found that McCabe lied under oath 3 times about leaking to the news media. Now, those are serious violations that involve at least 3 criminal statutes. And, of course, in the letter today, these lawmakers want McCabe investigated. Then on top of that, we have the Trump-hating FBI lovebirds, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. They're also being referred for possible criminal charges tonight. Now, the letter lays out how text messages show that Strzok removed a reference, remember the Clinton exoneration statement, explaining how she was emailing with President Barack Obama. They withdrew it. They took it out. They wiped it out, which means that Obama knew about the server all along. They changed it to a government official. Sure, that's what we'll call President Obama, a government official. Now, these lawmakers are also calling for members of the deep state to be investigated to lying to federal judges. We have been talking about this, and one of the biggest revelations in the Stephanopoulos Comey interview. In other words, the unverified, uncorroborated, Clinton bought and paid for phony Russian propaganda dossier dossier. They used that in order to get a warrant to spy on an American, a Trump campaign associate, in the lead up to an election. That's lying to a judge. And they never told the judge she paid for it either. Now, these are all major developments tonight, and all these bad actors that we have now been exposing for over a year, unpeeling that onion day by day, well, now today, criminal referrals have been made to the Department of Justice, finally. The big question tonight is, what will the Attorney General Jeff Sessions do tonight? Will he defend the rule of law, the Constitution, equal application of the law, equal justice under the law? Now, that big story, by the way, is only one of our breaking news stories tonight. The House Oversight Committee Chairman, Trey Gowdy, he's asking the DOJ and the FBI and the Inspector General to look into issues that are raised by Congressman Mark Meadows in North Carolina about possible DOJ FBI collusion over James Comey's June 2016 statement and the larger Clinton email investigation. Now, Congressman Meadows is rightly saying that he has uncovered new emails and text messages that prove this coordination. Unbelievable. We need to get to the bottom of all this. All right, now finally tonight, the self-righteous James Comey, who never should have wrote this book. He should have listened to me. His lawyers never should have allowed him to go out on this media blitz tour, which, you know, apparently knows no bounds. So Comey sat down with late-night Trump hater Stephen Colbert. He had so many hard questions. It was unbelievable. I almost felt bad for him. Take a look.
I know that when you were fired, you say in the book that when it was over, you flew back on a plane to the East Coast, drinking Pinot Noir out of a paper cup. So I thought maybe we could recreate that happy moment for you right now. If it felt like you were working for a mob boss, were you surprised that you got whacked? Because that's what they do. Are there things that you know about the Russian investigation that were happening before you were fired that we haven't learned yet as a public?
Yes.
Can you tell me what those are?
No.
No.
He's tweeted at me probably 50 times. I've been gone for a year. I'm like a breakup he can't get over.
All right, those are the types of questions that Comey has received so far from so-called journalists in the news media. Well, not Colbert, obviously. And finally today, well, somebody in the media, Meghan McCain, decided to actually challenge the former FBI director. Good for her. Watch this.
It feels like you might have some scores to settle, you know, that you might have a little bit of anger left over and a little bit of bitterness. Would you plead guilty to all that?
Yeah, I wouldn't, actually. I would take that one to trial because I think it is raw in the sense that I find it really painful to relive. Reading that book, doing the audiobook left me physically drained. But I really don't feel a sense of anger.
The most widely cited parts have to do with your description and words about President Trump. I mean, including calling his skin orange and saying his looked like he had tanning goggles. And, you know, some people said that was kind of, for lack of a better word, that was a little catty. Did you enjoy taking those shots at the president?
No, I didn't think of them as shots, and I still don't.
Really? Well, you don't think you've diminished yourself?
I hope not.
And a lot of the things you're saying and doing are highly political. And I just don't understand what you gain trying to sort of clear the deck here by bringing things like this up.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think of it as my politics. I think of it as my values. I mean, what I missed.
Your wife, and you talked about in George Stephanopoulos how she was at the Women's March and she was very sad on election night.
Sure.
And, you know, but why bring up politics now? No disrespect, but what your take on the current Republican Party is, I'm more interested in what you know about national security. Your interview this morning, I'm ego-driven in service to Trump's ego. It doesn't reflect values at all. I just don't understand why you're so, you sound like a political commentator to me more than
I don't mean to be.
All right, great job, Savannah. Great job, Meghan McCain. Now, it's about time members of the media took the kid gloves off and asked some real tough questions. Like we've been saying, Mr. Comey, you want to sit down for a real interview? I'll give you 3 hours on my radio show, 575 stations, and a full hour here on the Fox News channel. And finally tonight, James Comey, his BFF, Andrew McCabe, they appear to be headed for a really ugly breakup. Now, this comes after Comey confirmed today that he kicked off the investigation that led to McCabe being fired. McCabe is now firing back at Comey and saying that he disclosed to his former boss that he was leaking to the media. Now the question is, since McCabe could face criminal charges, is he going to flip? Will he cooperate against Comey?
This Uranium One story has been debunked countless times. It is nothing but a false charge that the Trump administration is trying to drum up in order to avoid attention being directed at them. This is such an abuse of power, and it goes right at the rule of law. If they send a signal that we're going to be like some dictatorship, some authoritarian regime where political opponents are going to be unfairly, fraudulently investigated, that rips at the fabric of the contract we have, that we can trust our justice system.
Really? Hillary talking about the rule of law and the possibility of a special counsel to investigate her role in that whole corrupt Uranium One deal? She's obviously getting nervous. Here with more reaction, author of the best-selling book, Clinton Cash. Really? We're going to get a lecture on the rule of law? You know, I watch people now assail you. Even the Never Trump crowd is now trying to come to the defense, I noticed, of Hillary Clinton. I want to give you a chance to respond and explain to people all of the connections here. I'll hand it to you.
Well, thanks, Sean. Look, this is a story that begins in 2005. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton helped Frank Giustra, a Canadian investor, get very, very rich uranium deposits in Kazakhstan from the Kazakh government. And we now have a video deposition from the Kazakh uranium minister at the time going into detail about how they were extorted by then-Senator Hillary Clinton to grant those concessions to Frank Giustra. She was on the Armed Services Committee. She would not meet with Kazakh officials. Her committee had responsibility for the distribution of funds that were supposed to go to Kazakhstan. She made it clear, no uranium for Giustra. You are not going to get your support from the federal government. After Giustra got those uranium deposits, he sent $30 million to the Clinton Foundation.
What is the timeline on that?
Yeah, so that's 2005 is when that deal happens. Within 2 months, he sends the first $30 million to the Clinton Foundation. 2007, they do what's called a reverse merger. They take those Kazakh assets, they put them in a company called Uranium One. Uranium One acquires uranium assets in the United States. In 2010, the Russian government says, we want to buy Uranium One. That triggers the federal approval of the United States. As the U.S. federal government and the State Department is considering that deal, the chairman of Uranium One, Ian Telfer, sends $2.35 million to the Clinton Foundation through a private foundation. It was never disclosed. It was only discovered by going through Canadian tax records. Bill Clinton gives a $500,000 speech the month as that approval is going through to a company in Russia that is involved financially with Uranium One. The ties and the deals go on and on. And let me just add, Sean, by the way, it's about to get a lot more interesting because we know some details about this lobbyist, this source that's come forward. His name is William Campbell. He lives in Florida. He was with Cassidy and Associates, which is one of the big lobbying firms in D.C., where he lobbied on Russian interests from 2007 to 2008. He then started his own firm, was paid $50,000 a month by the Russians for lobbying. And this is what his contract was for, quote, to improve the media and political environment in the U.S. in respect to the surprise of the Russian uranium products, and, quote, to set up meetings with U.S. administration officials, members of Congress, and other key opinion elite in 10X and Russian government officials. So this is a very inside guy that's coming forward as this whistleblower.
Russia, we had Putin bad actors in the United States. Mueller was the FBI director. Eric Holder was one of the 9 that signed off on the deal, CFIUS deal, the committee. Then you've got bribery, extortion, kickbacks, money laundering, and racketeering. Mueller had to know because they had an FBI informant. He had his own personal experience, ended up 4 years being an informant. Then you got tapes, and then we've got documents, and we got emails, and a firsthand account. And that Putin was using breaking all of these laws to get a foothold in the uranium market. And they knew in 2009.
You're right, Sean. In fact, the purchase of uranium-1 was announced by Vladimir Putin himself. It was reported in the Moscow Times, which is an English-language publication in Moscow. He personally released the funds to purchase uranium-1 in the United States. And look, the argument that the Clinton defenders use is, well, there were all these government agencies that were involved in this process. She didn't do it by herself. From the standpoint of bribery, that is irrelevant. If you're a congressman sitting on a committee and a committee votes unanimously for something, but you got paid to vote for that, it doesn't matter what your colleagues did. You committed bribery, and that's why this needs to be investigated.
All right, Peter, we're going to stay on this. And by the way, the FBI informant I was just talking about, his name was revealed today. We have John Solomon, Sarah Carter coming.